Today we're here with Bart Van der Heyden, the inventor of the EPiC seating system, also known as the Effortless Postural Control. Bart, thank you for joining us. Let's start at the beginning. What inspired you to create the EPiC seating?
Yeah, well, I'm a physical therapist, and I've been working with seating and seating challenges for over 30 years now. And I've seen that as hard as we try, it's always difficult to get a good seating intervention for a client. I think we always struggle with sliding, head control. So if the head is not in the right spot, really it's difficult for wheelchair users to interact, to see what's going on, to be functional, to use their hands. And they're sliding often, they're collapsing their posture, so they're falling forwards, and then breathing becomes difficult. They're sliding, respiration, digestion is off, and I struggled finding a good solution with the current equipment that we have. So we do have a lot of great seating systems and great seating equipment, but I still wasn't very satisfied with all the results that we could obtain. A lot of the times we're dealing with static solutions, so the posture is always going to be the same unless people are going to change it. And then also some of the functions like recline, back support recline, is not always solving the problem. If you're reclining the back support, there is often a shear force between the back support and the wheelchair user, and that results in, when you're reclining backwards, that the lateral shift upwards in relation to the client, so the postural supports are not at the same spot anymore. And after you change recline and you go forwards from a reclined position, they go down, so that's creating shear, sliding. Often you need to reposition the client. And then also tilt in space is nice, but if you tilt too much for all the time, it's not facilitating head control. So I was struggling to find a better position with the current equipment. So I said to my wife the same thing, and she's also a physio, and she said, well, do something about it. You know?
That's good to hear that's international.
Yeah.
Wives saying that to their husbands.
Yeah. Stop complaining and deal with it. Yeah. And that's what started the whole process.
That's awesome. So you're a physio, and how long have you been practicing?
Yeah, since 93.
Since 93.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you've had quite the journey in practicing with clients, but also in education.
Yeah.
So that's kind of really helped you create this this new system, this new way of looking at seating.
Yeah.
And so
I've been specializing in seating and seating ergonomics for so many years. So I really tried to analyze exactly what the problem was. You know, so I started with a correct analysis on why we're not reaching the results. You know, so that's how I started. And then I said, well, I'll talk to you about recline and tilt in space, how that's often a challenge. And then I also looked at lumbar support, and the lumbar support is also challenging because a lot of our clients have a rather stiff lumbar spine. So pushing directly on the lumbar segments often doesn't result in extension. We all want extension because then you're facilitating breathing, interaction, upper extremity movements. But if there is already a set passive position and then you're pushing on that lumbar spine, it's often not resulting in an extension, but it's resulting in a push, and then you're creating shear force, sliding. And that's what I experienced as well. And then we all want this extension. We all want it. But the question then was how to get it. You know, so, and that got me thinking. So I really want the same thing. I want extension, but also want postural variation, because the best posture is the next posture. You know, so it's the same with me. I'm sitting here talking to you, and if I sit all the time in the same position, it's strange. You know, so it helps if you can change your position during the day, even if it's just a small bit. You know, just to look at people or to look around and move or use your hands. So we need that, and if we need it, people in wheelchairs can benefit from it. But I couldn't find that, so then I also wanted something that provided extension but also postural variation. Yeah,
That's awesome. And we're going to get more into that. So EPiC seating was born out of the desire to give people back something many of us take for granted.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned right now, the postural variation that we're going to be constantly doing in this interview, the ability to move naturally. Can you explain how the system works?
Yeah.
Because I think the first time I experienced it, which I've experienced products before in the past, there's a part that you almost feel like it's magic.
Yeah.
I think every person that sits in it, they don't understand why their body's feeling the way it does, which is kind of an amazing thing until they start to look at it and they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But there is a science to this and in your development, in your design, if you can kind of take us through that.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for that. But I said, well, we all want the same thing, right? I talked to you about extension of the spine and facilitating interaction and then also posture variation. So then I said, well, how to get there? And I think in order to get there, I needed to have a new function. And the logic behind it is quite simple. So I want to adjust the pelvic to thigh angle. So the hip angle, but the pelvic to thigh angle is probably more accurate. And I want to adjust that pelvic to thigh angle according to the mobility of the user. So that's nothing new. So we always want to make sure that we don't push the pelvis forwards if there's no range of motion. So we're accommodating to that. But once that adjustment is made, that's going to be a stable adjustment, right? And then usually we always learn that after the pelvis, you push on the lumbar spine and then you work your way up on the spine. And I said, well, no, we're not going to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the thoracic or the higher lumbar segments and the thoracic segments, and we're going to move them backwards in relation to the pelvis. And if you do that, then of course the lumbar spine has to follow because everything is connected. And if the lumbar spine follows dorsal segmentation of the spine, then it's creating an extension. So it must go in a lordosis or in an extension. And that's exactly what we're looking for, right? So that was a concept. So I needed to have a separate dorsal segmentation in relation to the rest of the spine, and that will create an extension of the lumbar spine. And that's probably what you felt when you were trying it. And then the problem was that if you have a movement of that dorsal spine, that movement must be exactly in sync with the movement of your body, because otherwise you have the same problems as with recline, that the back support will shift in relation to your spine whenever you're moving. And you can say, well, perhaps that's not such a big deal, but it probably is, because then if you're using lateral supports or a head support, it's going to shift all the time when you're adjusting or when you have posture variation. So that movement needed to be exactly in sync with your body. And then I was researching what the best pivot point would be, and then I found that pivot point. And that pivot point is crucial, because that's going to make sure that you can allow posture variation without any consequence in terms of posture. So your lateral supports, your head supports, all your postural interventions will remain the same, even if you're changing, if you're providing posture variation. So that was then that's basically the concept. So extension of the spine through dorsal segmentation and posture variation. So people are able to change it, the posture variation, through finding the exact range of motion of the spine. So I was then working with some prototypes and just trying to figure out how to execute that in a product. And I was working a lot of times, a long time on this, and then I finally got it, and it started working, and then I experienced it myself, fine-tuning it, and then I said, well, that movement works, and it was a good moment. It was a good moment. But it took me a while. And you can say, well, is that posture variation just for changing posture? It probably is, but it also has an additional benefit that as a clinician, you often adjusting seating systems, and it's always difficult to do. You often have to use tools or hardware to do it, and then usually when you have adjusted the hardware, it stays in place all the time. But I also thought it must be really easy for seating professionals to work with posture, and that dorsal segmentation, if it moves in sync with your body, is so easy now. You don't need tools. You can just move it in the right spot, see what the benefit is for the client, get feedback from the client, and there's no consequence in terms of adjusting laterals. So even if because I wanted to be having a posture variation, but you can also use it as an adjustment. So just adjusting it and then keeping it in the same position and then readjust it during the day if you want to. But even that adjustment process is simple because of that dorsal segmentation moving in sync with your spine. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
If you can, talk a little bit about the medical aspect of what it does, because for me, I'm a lower back injured person. I've got an S1 disc.
Okay.
And I've talked to a lot of people as they're trying it, and they'll tell me the same thing. And then all of them instantly respond like, that feels really amazing at where the injury's at.
Yeah.
And so that you talk about the dorsal expansion and all that, the flexion of that, but also talk about what that's doing for people that aren't moving.
Yeah.
If they're in a rigid state, and the fact that they have that flexion, what does that do for the spine for relief?
Yeah.
Because I think that there's some stuff where people miss having a rigid system, which then you have gravity that's combating you.
Correct.
You could do tilt, but you have all the factors that come into it. And I think that there's something that's beautiful about that postural variation.
Correct.
That people are really missing the health of your spine, just us being able to do that, flex it, open it up, and compress these different things. That I think that it'd be really nice for us to understand that from a clinical and medical standpoint.
Yeah, well, so interesting to look at the spine and the problems of pain in the spine. Well, of course, when I invented the concept, I didn't just want to put it on wheelchair users without thoroughly testing it. So, of course, the first testing person was me, my wife, and we also have a clinic, a physio clinic, and the people there. So that was good to have confirmation of peers, but of course we needed to go further. And a big step was also the work with Alexander Sievert, Dr. Alexander Sievert. And he did a finite element analysis, and that finite element analysis allows you to analyze exactly what happens at tissues and the spine in the vertebral disc space when you are facilitating a movement, a biomechanical movement. So we mimic the movement that the EPiC system was providing to wheelchair users. And then we saw that as you are completing that movement, the loading on the intervertebral discs is central. So that's amazing because it basically shows that the load of your spine is transmitted in the middle of your intervertebral disc and not towards the edges. And that movement is also nice because if you have a movement, if you have no movement, all that loading is always going to be at the same spot as your intervertebral disc. And also the muscles around it are always going to be in the same length and the same position. So it's always good to have slight variations to it. And if you then stay at a certain position, then you wish that load is always in the center of that intervertebral disc. And we were able to see that, along with other things. Like we saw that the effect on the rib cage was also better, that your thorax is expanding more. So your breathing, if your diaphragm can descend further, so your volume, your resting your vital capacity is improving, even in a passive seating position. And then, of course, the effect on the head position. But we also saw that there's an effect on pelvic alignment, so there's less posterior pelvic tilt and less shear deformation of tissues in front of your ischials, high risk areas. So that gave me a lot of confidence, So then we have science behind it, So that was fantastic. And then I also made a furniture application. So a designer relax chair that was then also successful, used by consumers all over the world. So then I felt very confident that it would be a benefit for wheelchair users as well. So yeah,
That's awesome. That's great. That's great, Bart, and I appreciate you sharing, expanding on that. So it's not only innovative; it's practical.
Yes.
It sounds like. So
Yes.
based off of some of the examples that you give there. So why is it important for the everyday user, wheelchair user?
Yeah.
Why would you say that this is, if somebody hasn't considered it or thought about it?
Yeah.
Because how I've discussed it with people, and I love the term postural variance.
Yeah.
Because it's key what you say. We're all moving. We should move.
Yeah.
And when we don't allow people to move, they have the ability. It's a lot of factors come in: fatiguing, deformities, all these different things are number one. Enemy gravity.
Right.
Starts to create stuff. So what would you say it's important for the everyday user?
Yeah, well, I think it's important for everybody, right? So if you have tone, if you don't have tone, if you have a passive condition, if you have a changing condition, it always makes sense to have postural variation. And you can look at postural variation on a timeline, and you can say, well, postural variation, it could mean that I have real-time direct posture variation. Like now, I can always change my posture, and it's direct, it's all the time. But you can also say, well, I'm going to maintain one position, and I'm going to keep it, but then in a couple of hours, I'm going to change it, or somebody will change it for me. And there's going to be no consequence, no tools. That's also posture variation. So you can have different timelines on it. So in the field, it could mean that the wheelchair user can can influence their posture and their posture variation directly themselves. And what's, for instance, the benefit? Well, imagine I'm propelling, or I'm using my hands, or I'm just turning my head. That's also going to cause a movement of your spine. So if your system allows you to move when you are moving your head, your upper extremities, or when you have tone, it's of course a functional benefit, because you can then reach further, you can look upright, and the system will follow the movement of your spine. So there's a functional benefit besides breathing and facilitating a head position. So there's always that. And then a lot of wheelchair users, everybody changes their posture. So the posture is never going to be a static thing. Even for us, we're getting older, so over time our posture will change because we're older, so people in wheelchairs age as well, so their postural needs might change, but also due to the condition that many of the wheelchair users have, there might be a progression to be expected. For instance, people with muscle dystrophy or degenerative disorders, what works now will not work necessarily in a couple of months. So it's nice to have a system that's easy to accommodate to changes, even if it's perhaps a longer term posture variation, but it's nice to do that. And then I also thought that, not everybody stays in a lot of wheelchair users stay in a home environment, and they have caregivers, different caregivers sometimes. So it must be very simple to provide postural variation. So it must be something that doesn't require a degree, a postural degree to adjust. So it must be easy. So I said, well, if that movement happens in sync and you just have a handle to flip, and there's no consequence when you change it, then it becomes user friendly. So everybody can do it. And the wheelchair user can provide feedback, and perhaps they can do it themselves. Yeah. And then there's of course tone. Some people don't have the ability to control their postural tone. So it's fantastic if you then can still guide a posture, but then allow tone to flow, because if tone is often restricted or movement is restricted, then what you then often see is that people are fighting against their seating system, and that fighting is going to cause postural loss. So they're going to slide. You're going to need to tie them down and use belts and harnesses, and it becomes a monster. And sometimes it makes sense to allow people a certain amount of movement, and then that tone can be deflected somewhere. So we call that an open kinetic chain, rather than closing a kinetic chain with an uncontrolled movement. So a lot of people benefit from that, and that's also what we see in the field.
Really, the uniqueness is when they get to where they feel comfortable, it holds them.
Yeah.
It almost feels like like you're wearing a backpack that's always with you. Anywhere you go to, the back is staying with you.
Right, exactly. So I think the term dynamic seating is a general term, so a lot of the times when we talk about dynamic seating, we think about people with high tone, and then we say, well, dynamic is good for high tone. And often the functions of dynamic systems are an entire back support recline. And we talked about back support recline, not saying it's wrong, but it's a bit, so here we're talking about a specific movement that we're allowing, and that movement can be enabled all the time, or you can also keep that movement in an alignment and then change it during the time. So it's about a specific movement, the dorsal segmentation that we are doing. And that movement can be an active movement, so inhibited, the postural variation that's going to be facilitated by the user themselves, or it can be a postural variation inhibited by or provided by a caregiver, and then maintained at a certain alignment. So it can be an adjustment. You keep that adjustment. It can be an adjustment by the user themselves or a caregiver themselves, and it can be an adjustment that's going to remain in an alignment, and then over time you change it again, perhaps changing condition. But it's a specific movement that you're allowing, and that's the movement of dorsal segmentation. So as a physical therapist, I'm always looking at where do I want movement and for what purpose, and then it makes sense. But you have to be specific at what type of movement you want to facilitate and what you anticipate the outcome would be. And I think a specific movement and a specific guidance of that movement in terms of resistance, or how to use that movement. Do you use that movement all the time or for specific tasks is crucial. So I think it's a step further towards the thinking towards dynamic sitting.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So in all of this, it's really about dignity, independence, and health.
Absolutely.
Not just equipment.
Yeah.
So I think that's the purpose of it, right?
Yes, I fully agree. Because at the end of the day, people in wheelchairs, they don't care about the equipment. They care about their function. So how can I be better? How can I lead my life? And that's a great responsibility. That's why I'm very careful. I don't take it for granted, because it's people's independence that you're trying to help. So, but that's ultimately what it's all about. It's all about wheelchair users and how they can get the most or the best out of their day. How can we make their lives as easy as possible? And that's what triggered it. So that was my only motivator. Yeah, only that.
So Bart, thank you for sharing your story and for creating something that can make such a difference. EPiC seating isn't just about a better wheelchair system. It's about giving people back the ability to live and function more comfortably every day.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bart.
Thank you. Thank you all.